In today's video, we go from this
Jake's dominating
to this.
God bless it. It's tough. You gotta win this fight, Jake.
Hello and welcome, fellow readers between the lines. I am Andrew, your favorite sociologist, and today on the greatest MMA channel of all time, we are going to be covering Logan Paul and his crew's reaction to his little brother Jake Paul's performance at the press conference and face-offs that I covered in my last video. Now, I want to thank you guys so much for the reaction, the views, and all the comments to that video. I'm just a niche MMA guy that's just getting started at this, and I'm brand new, and I had no idea how big this was until the reaction to this video in specific, and then finding out that other channels with like legit people who do this for a living are doing reports on the Ben Askren Jake Paul thing as well. And one in particular that I found out about was Believing Bruce. And check that out if you don't know about it already. But be sure to subscribe to us too, because we really need the help in the algos. But nonetheless, I binge watched all of his old big fights that he covered and sent him a message. And when I saw the coverage of this particular press conference, it was all from one angle. And I mentioned to him in that message, like, hey, did you happen to see it from this other angle? Because you don't see when Ben walks past Jake and tries to poke him in the eye. And I don't know if it's because I wrote him that in the message, which would be really cool, or if he already had it up his sleeve and was planning on doing it, or if other people mentioned it to him as well. But he just put out a video with a breakdown of that angle specifically, a very detailed breakdown of the face-off and the aftermath and that lead up to it very specifically. And that's important because what we're going to be looking at is Logan Paul and those people, I don't know the names of the other ones in the studio, but their reaction to Jake's performance and what I go ahead and mention throughout the entire presser in painstaking detail because I have yet to perfect clarity and concision, but I'm working on it. And what Believing Bruce says is three major things that happen at the face-off where Ben essentially defeats Jake Paul. So taking all of that into consideration, what is Logan and this crew going to say about it? And how are they going to frame it? And how are we going to look at it? Well, let's get right to it and see what they have to say. And I'm trying to do this all in one take through it. So bear with me, folks. Thank you so much.
Jake Paul, Ben Askren. Whoa!
Oh shit!
Whoa!
That was so funny.
I've never seen a comeback like this in my life. It was like
so the first thing that I noticed there was he's not saying the exact so they have to kind of goof off a little bit to sort of lighten the mood. Additionally, even when Jake Paul was at the conference, when he accentuated with his hand and punctuated his stuff, he was on point. It was congruent with the names and the people that he was pointing to in the audience. This guy puts his hands out and it doesn't seem congruent with the rest of his motions. It seems like there's something a bit off in it. Now watch this next portion where he says Jake dominated.
The whole time I was like, Jake's dominating,
shaking his head while he's saying Jake was dominating the press conference. How can that be? Now, sometimes people will shake their heads with a yes answer if there's some other thought related to that could be going on. But right here, he's telling us that Jake was dominating, straight up shaking his head. There isn't much more that could be going through that. Now, look how he mentions this next gesture that they wind up saying overshadowed the press conference later on, and how he performs this out and what he says during it about what Jake did in reaction to it.
The end, Ben took that little strike, little fucking little. I'll see you later, kitty cat. Oh, no. I'll see you later, kitty cat. And I'm gonna turn around this way and I'm gonna pet the kitty cat and walk away. And I was like, no.
So obviously he had that plan. He was going to say something about the kitty cat, and he does it with a limp wrist to kind of make it look not as intense as Ben did it. But I noticed that while he's doing that, he's looking down and to the right also. You'll notice a lot of times when people are thinking and they're looking for words, they'll look down and to the left. That's kind of the direction that most people, not everybody, some it will be the other direction, but like 9 out of 10, at least 3/4, looks down and to the left when you're trying to think of some sort of specific things for your thoughts, whereas the right side is the emotional side. So when you're looking there, you're usually putting yourself in some emotional place. And I just find it really interesting that he's looking down and to the right as he's describing this action by Ben Askren in a sort of lighthearted, demeaning sort of way. Is he what's he feeling while he's doing that and thinking about what Ben did in that press conference, especially given he was just shaking his head with the proclamations of the dominations a little bit earlier.
Bro, I will admit that little fight, he had like a quick little, but then KSI made a video where he slapped his ass.
Now, if you're trying to describe how someone is dominating in a situation where basically their limbic system was triggered, because that's exactly what Ben did. He was putting him up to a test there. He knew what he was doing. He put his hand in his face as he was turning his back, knowing that one of two things would happen. Either Jake would play it cool and keep control of himself, or he would react. And if he reacted, well, what would that reaction be? And he was betting on it being something like this rather than him getting actually slugged or grabbed and thrown to the ground or something on those lines. So it's very, very clear if you're trying to say how someone dominated somebody else, you're not going to say gave him a little and demonstrate with a wristed slap, not even using your full arm across the screen to show what happened. So what exactly does that say in the way he's characterizing it about what he really believes about it?
Dude, it's just the
Bro,
fuck.
this is the moment you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the whole press conference, Jake's got an uphill battle anytime like anything he does is public in this way, like a press conference. Like,
so Jake has an uphill battle, he says. Basically, he's already making excuses for his little brother. Well, if he had trouble, it's because he has an uphill battle. And he really did good. It's just that all the good that he did was overshadowed by this singular moment when we've got analysis of the rest of the presser, the whole rest of the face-off. And there's just so many dimensions throughout the presser, the clusters of nervous ticks and signals, and all the multiple places in that face-off where Believing Bruce says he was defeated in those 3 different places. But they're going to talk about this, the one most egregious defeat overshadowing it to at first try to play. But there's a change at the end. And when we get to that, it's really, really interesting. So let's keep going.
I know Jake, and like I thought some of the stuff he was saying was funny, and I was thoroughly entertained because that's why I watch
So
these.
funny.
I just want to be fucking entertained, bro. Like let's hear like people say.
Boy, they keep using such colorful language. So some of the stuff he thought was funny doesn't really say how much of that some, whether it was most of the conference, but clearly wants to say good things about his brother as much as possible because it's his brother after all, and he wants to make him look good. But in order to do that, you really have to not acknowledge some of the major, major things that went on throughout the whole press conference and face-off.
Some dumb shit, slip up on their words, and make the other person or try to anyways look stupid. And I was watching.
So right there, we have somebody's going to slip up on their words, and the other person's going to try to make them look stupid. Well, maybe it's not that they're slipping on their words. Maybe it's just that the other person is saying witty, honest things that really do ruffle that person's feathers or make them appear in a better or worse light than that other person.
I thought Jake had some funny things that made me
He
laugh.
got fucking Masvidal.
He got Masvidal on the like that was funny. That was funny. He replayed Ben getting knocked out for 10 seconds straight. Like, that was funny.
All right, those two parts, I wanted to cover that together because what's really, really interesting is the little brother complex that Jake seems to suffer from, I think, only was exacerbated and put on display with him getting Masvidal on the phone. It's somebody, a bigger guy that's already a pro in the sport that knocked this guy out, and he's getting him on the phone. And what's really interesting is I intend to cover the video with Jake talking after the press conference in his suite in the Venetian next, and the way he characterizes things versus the way others characterize him, including his brother and stuff. It's really, really different. Like, for instance, in that interview, he says that he pushed Ben and he flew, and we're going to see what they say about him later on in this particular interview discussion thing that they're having here. Let's keep on going.
But no matter what Jake does, yo, Twitter's like, yo, fuck this, he's drunk. Like the kid.
Okay, no matter what Jake does, Twitter is like, and yeah, they're going to be on him no matter what he does. But that doesn't mean that everything that he does isn't worth it just because he's got haters. Maybe sometimes Twitter goes crazy on somebody because they really are being a bully, because they really did fall short and look foolish in some situation that they were in. Maybe they really did lose that battle of wits or war of words and came away looking like the smaller man. Maybe that really did happen, and it's not just the haters this time. So it's really easy to dismiss it as like, oh, well, I'm always getting criticized, therefore that particular criticism must also be invalid.
The kid just can't win.
It's just also really tough.
Now, right here is getting really interesting because he's got the beard rubbing going on, and that little thinker gesture. Well, of course, you're thinking when you say that. It's usually you've got something to say, but it's not fully there yet. You're still formulating the thoughts and words of what you're going to say, and maybe there's a bit of nervousness to it because you're not quite sure yet, and it's an important thing that you're saying. So you're really trying to put it together. There's a lot of that going on that could be very deeply going on right here when somebody's kind of rubbing their beard and performing that gesture.
To be that guy, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like that incessant, fly of especially.
I think gadfly is the word he's looking for.
You know what I'm saying?
That is hysterical. Somebody who is as sweet as Ben Askren, because Ben Askren was actually one of the most hated guys and one of the top poop talkers in MMA. And what's so crazy is that he has become the good guy because this other guy, Jake, is so darn villainous. So it's absolutely comical to see this going on, and that they're kind of calling Ben Askren a sweetheart because of what he was known for in MMA and how things have changed. And it gets more complicated when they bring up Jorge.
Well, we shot our episode.
Really, I'm not saying. I'm just saying Jake has. It's tough. It's made tougher by that for Jake to be.
You see, he was so intently rubbing that he even pushed his hand away so they could finish his thought and what exactly he was saying there.
That asshole character that he plays. When you're up against that guy, when you're up against,
dude, we had.
So, all right, he talks about him playing this a-hole character, and it's tough to be that when you're up against Askren. Well, if it's really a character that he's playing, then he just wouldn't play that character and be different about Ben Askren, knowing that it takes a different strategy to win. And so playing a particular character like that would be a bad idea. So is it that, or is Jake really being his true self in this and all of these other instances and not really playing a character? Maybe he really is the guy that he portrays himself and shows himself to be.
Ben Askren on the show. The episode's coming out. It's a good fucking episode. Yeah, we did a really good job.
By the way, when's it coming out? Whoa.
They just really have colorful language, don't they?
When's it coming out? Tomorrow. No, what is it?
April
Can
10th.
we just fucking say, because every fucking comment is
We did a good job of roasting him. given.
Okay, so they're talking about this episode where Ben Askren was cool and actually did an episode of a show that they released some smaller segment of, and the rest of it's coming out, and he's talking about what they did for Askren and how Askren interacted on this particular episode.
Him a platform to talk about his really exciting and interesting life, and trying to be impartial. Like I said, it looks like he punches in a dream. Yeah.
So they're talking about what they kind of allowed for Ben Askren. They tried to be impartial in this and give him a platform because he does have a crazy, interesting life to talk about. Two-time NCAA champion, Olympic wrestler. Like the guy's been top 10 in 4 professional sports. So he's got some stuff to talk about, and it gets even more interesting in just a little bit.
And you know, I called Jake. I said you did a good job, but it almost is like everything was overshadowed
By that push.
by this moment.
I think the push is the thing.
So yes, it may have been overshadowed by that moment, but all of the other moments in the conference are also moments, well, not all of them, but most of them are moments where the low point is getting, it's Jake. He's not the one winning most of this conference. So even though most of it was overshadowed, that's probably a good thing because it doesn't show just how consistently poor he was throughout the whole darn thing, unless you actually watch the whole darn thing like I did way too many times.
Thing we're not talking about most. I mean, Ben Askren's a goddamn treat. Dog.
He's thick.
He's thick as he's thicker than a Snickers.
Well,
that
boy's
boy's
come out on the podcast. It wasn't that.
So they're talking about how thick he is and how hard he is to move, and that push wasn't getting talked about. Now, what's really interesting is in the next video that I intend to break down, which is Jake Paul talking in the Venetian right after it, he talks about how he went flying when he pushed him. So you've got 2 guys that are arguably on the same team characterizing things very differently. Oh, he's a tree, so he wouldn't move too far, versus, oh, well, he went flying when I pushed him. For a guy in flip-flops, he didn't fly too far for giving him a push. You should topple somebody in flip-flops over, for crying out loud, if you give him your best shove.
Cut the shit,
funny.
Georgie.
That was funny.
That guy is rooted deeply into the Ohio soil,
Mm.
Wisconsin soil.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
immovable.
Yo, he's also, I gotta say, when he came out here, he's like, I have a genius level IQ. I was like, okay, maybe. Now I'm starting to think, yo, is he playing all of us, dude?
I've got to say, he probably does because, you know, we can smell our own without trying to be cocky about it. But I was in those Gifto classes. I bet you guys never could tell with some of the comments you've already put up here when I was younger. And he talks and acts exactly like one of those darn Gifto kids. And that's why he has a knack for making himself so unlikable by being a smartass with all of his crap talking that he did in MMA. He's that witty. And usually these guys that become announcers that they say have a high fight IQ, it's because they have a high IQ generally, and that translates into the octagon or the cage and into their careers as analysts and commentators later on, because they're able to go ahead and do those kinds of things. They're not just regular old fighters. And Ben is definitely eligible for that club. I would say that he's probably going to qualify for Mensa if he hasn't already taken the test, just so he could carry the membership card around. Now, I've never heard him say anything like that on tape, but I don't doubt that he wouldn't say it when off tape, especially in a situation with like Jake and Logan Paul, if he knows that about himself.
You know how much clout this dude is getting off of this? His tweets are flying right now. He
Yes.
snapped back at Jorge Masvidal, and the tweet got like 40 to 50,000 favorites. He's like,
and that is what's truly amazing. Not only has he become the hero against Jake Paul, but he tweeted at Masvidal because Masvidal has become a villain. Masvidal, who won the BMF belt, the baddest MF in the freaking UFC, and he is becoming a villain specifically because he was working with Jake Paul during this so that he could beat up on Ben Askren because, well, he already beat up on Ben Askren. So to team up with this oafish guy, he's looking like an oaf himself and really bullyish, and people are really turning on Jorge Masvidal. Now listen to the specifics of this one tweet here.
Jorge, I've waited 2 years to say this. You got lucky with the knee, and I made you famous.
You got lucky with the knee, and I made you famous. And he waited 2 years to say that because he knows he's exactly right. Ben Askren is playing him and pulling all the clout. He himself said he's having fun, although he's taking it seriously. And this is the most he's gotten paid for a fight in his professional career. So not only is he making bank, but he got to become the good guy. He actually said that he was impressed with Jake's ability to make himself so dislikable, as if that was a talent. And he really means it, because, I mean, for all you might think the guy's playing it up just like he's got some other people fooled, but I don't think that that's the case at all. I think Ben's just giving him the benefit of the doubt a little too much there, trying to be the nice guy, but he's smart enough to know deep down that Jake is not the brightest light bulb in the lamp shop of combat sports, as I have mentioned. And he waited 2 years to say that to Jorge, this guy that's the hero and the well-liked guy that everybody was following is becoming the villain, and Ben Askren is becoming the hero in all of this because of this, while getting his biggest payday. Do you think the guy's got some high gauge wiring above his eyebrows? I would definitely think so.
Kamaru's gonna beat your ass again, and like people are like, yeah, like yo, Ben Askren is
There you
fucking
have it.
capitalizing
He
on
dropped
the
the
situation.
Rocky video.
That also
Well
crazy.
produced Rocky video.
God bless it. It's tough. You gotta win this fight, Jake.
I love the way that they end that, because you can tell in that final sequence that those are genuine reactions from Logan, and that they're like, holy cow, this guy really is playing it up and becoming. So what started out as a way to say, well, Jake did well and this one event overshadowed things, to they started looking at the big picture, and it's like, oh my gosh, Ben really is pulling this whole thing off and just gaining for himself from it. It's like, even if he loses, he still wins. And oh gosh, well, the only way they can win is if Jake wins that fight. And what does that do? That puts even more pressure on Jake Paul. And that is not good for Jake Paul from what we've seen out of him in all of these situations already. Thank you guys so much for joining me again. Please be sure to hit that like and the subscribe. It helps so much, especially with me being so wet behind the ears. And I do sincerely hope to see you in another video. I'm hoping to do his interview with ESPN from the Venetian next. So stay tuned, and thanks again. Bye-bye.